Thank you very much, Kim, and thanks everybody for joining this afternoon, our drone training closing ceremony. I think we're all very happy to have reached this point. To set the context and kick things off, as we all know, this is a Tech for Coastal Resilience project, and the long name integrating digital technologies and participatory tools to support coastal community resilience in Trinidad and Tobago. That's really what the project is about. It's supported by the Hit Reset Caribbean program. Hit Reset Caribbean is funded by the ACP Innovation Fund and implemented by the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States and the European Union. And of course, we know our key partners on this project are the Fisheries Division in the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries in Trinidad, as well as the Department of Marine Resources and Fisheries in Tobago. And this was really a 2-year project from March 2023. We are supposed to be going to December 2024 with possibility for an extension into a couple months next year. Just to say the overall impact that we've been looking for with this project is the improved resilience of coastal communities in Trinidad and Tobago to climate change impacts. But the way we've designed and approached this project is really focusing on applying innovative digital technologies and participatory approaches. And this is where the drones come in and the drone training and so on to really better engage coastal communities and for us to be able to capture their local knowledge for a more in-depth understanding of the vulnerabilities and what's happening in terms of climate change in those coastal communities, and for us to be able to use that information in coastal zone decision-making and management. And a big part of this process, again, linking in why this drone training was built into the process and important for us, we wanted to be able to resource and really build the capacity of key management agencies to be able to use the technology to capture the information and to integrate it into existing databases and whatever you all actually use to inform policy and practice. And in this case, we were able to resource not just the government agencies, but a couple of the civil society organizations like Species and like Future Fishers. So we were really happy about that. Just a reminder, because we're going to go into this, we targeted 10 communities, and I just wanted to put this up to say that we really were very happy with the type of teamwork and collaboration we saw, because there was a mix of the various agencies going out into these various communities as part of this training, as part of the coursework that we were doing. And so I think we were able to achieve at least that sort of start in terms of networking, collaboration, and teamwork around coastal resilience issues. I'm going to stop there, Kim. I think that's pretty much it in terms of what we want to say for an introduction, and I think the rest of the session is going to speak for itself.
Yeah, I think so too. Thanks so much, Candace. That was a great opening here. Okay, so the agenda today, Candace just gave us a quick overview of the project objectives and goals, but I'm going to talk about the background of the drone project, the experience of the cohort, and then we're just going to crack right into these results, which is really the meat of the matter today. I'm really excited for everybody to present their results. So we're all here today because we understand the benefit of using drone technology and geospatial tools to help improve environmental management in terms of collaborative participatory data collection, but also in terms of accuracy and timeliness and efficiency of data. The goal of this project, really, as part of the larger Tech for Coastal Resilience project, was really an introduction to my participatory drone approach to mapping and monitoring environmental resources. So the project goals for the Tech for Coastal Resilience project was really to build the capacity in Trinidad and Tobago of partner agencies to collaboratively work together and manage coastal marine resources. We did this by applying training and practical skills in drone technologies and geospatial participatory mapping. And really the ultimate goal is to improve the national capacity to leverage digital technologies to improve ecosystem management within the country and region. So the focus, as I mentioned, I've trained multiple agencies and countries across the Caribbean, but the focus really of this monitoring approach was aimed at coastal community resilience. So we looked at a variety of ways and case studies that drone and geospatial technology can be applied. The time frame of this project was at least of the drone project has been with these teams been going on since about May of this year. This was a blended training cohort, so it comprised of an in-person component, virtual training and support. So our cohort, who was trained, it was actually an even split of males and females. The drone pilots were split also between the islands of Trinidad and Tobago. And we had a multitude of agencies that were involved across various industries and environmental applications within the country. Furthermore, our team was also split between community service organizations and government agencies. And most people actually started with either little or relatively a small amount of drone and geospatial mapping experience. So that was a really interesting to see where we started from, team, and where you are today, and the skills and knowledge that have been progressively learned and applied over the last 5 months. So as I mentioned, the approach was a blended approach over the course of this project, and it initially started with understanding a strong foundation in the basics, how to legally and effectively and safely fly drones, but also use mapping technology to go out and conduct mapping surveys at sites in Trinidad and Tobago. And then their skills and knowledge in this 1 week training boot camp was then applied in the development of these sites, which will be presented today. So not just going out and capturing the data, but also processing the data, analyzing the data, and reporting, and today the final test, how to effectively share and communicate these results in a way that we can improve decision-making, collaborative decision-making. As I mentioned, the 1 week boot camp was pretty intensive. We learned how to conduct safely missions, also legal implications and policies and procedures within the country. We learned also focus on coastal marine mapping techniques. We went out, we planned, we executed, and we processed and handled and managed the data. These students know I'm a GIS lecturer, so it's all about good quality data. So we focused a lot on data handling, management, storage procedures, as well as quality checks, assessments, and results, as well as the reports. As I mentioned, 2 different 1 week boot camps happened with 8 pilots in each boot camp, 1 week each in Trinidad and Tobago. What we did in these boot camps is the same things that they have been doing on their own at sites. We went out and we did from A all the way to Z, all the steps to map, monitor, process, and analyze the data at these boot camps. So these were very intensive, 8-hour a day, 5-day a week boot camps, but it set a good foundation for them. Then the teams went out, they had a little time to practice, and then I enrolled them in a virtual training academy. So this training has been going on for the last 2+ months, maybe 3 months for them. And so it was an online course and a mapping guidebook that I've developed that guides the team step by step through everything we learned at the boot camp, but how to do it on their own. So they went out, and you'll see the results of the 10 sites that these teams together worked on and went out and executed 100% on their own with just virtual support from me, such as office hours and Slack chat messages, etc. All of the lessons are available for rewatching and review, as well as lots of other resources I provided them online if they wanted to learn more about certain subjects. And then, as I mentioned, virtually over the last few months, they've applied their skills, and I've coached them in how to process, analyze, and report and download, share, etc. I've definitely put these guys through a lot of tests, and they can feel very confident in their skills thus far today. So I'm going to stop there, and now we are going to get into the most exciting part of the presentation, which will be the results of all of these sites. So each one of these teams, I'm limiting them to 5-minute elevator pitches type of talks about what they did, just so that we can really see the various applications and skills and knowledge they've learned. We're going to start off in Trinidad with Carli Bay.
Hi everyone. Okay, so I will be presenting on behalf of Mark Benjai and myself on the Carli Bay area. And this is our favorite area because it is where we started, where we initiated our entire training experience in terms of drone mapping and monitoring of the sites, and also applying it to what we do on a daily basis related to coastal zone management, but also coastal community resilience. So in terms of Carli Bay, this is on the west coast of Trinidad, specifically Pacific Estate. It is located within the Covatabaquite Regional Corporation, and the main economic activity is industrial activity, mainly oil and natural gas refining. We also have secondary economic activities such as fishing and agriculture in the area, but also recreational, religious, and cultural activities. And the main ecosystem types are intertidal flats, mangrove forests, sandy beaches, vegetation, and also rivers. In relation to the image on the right side of the screen, highlights where Carli Bay is in relation to the other sites, like CANARI, other mapping sites that this entire portfolio is based on. And we have a nice image of what this site looks like. In terms of our flight plans, we had mainly three primary mapping exercises within the area. The first one was about 27 minutes. We used up 2 batteries and it covered 78 hectares, capturing 429 images and 1 video. And you see the full extent within the first picture. In terms of the second mapping exercise, we completed it within 40 minutes using 3 batteries covering 134 hectares, and this captured 721 photos, and 1 panel was captured as part of this exercise. In terms of however, and this is basically a line by which we followed in terms of the river course. We followed the river course in terms of understanding what are the key features along the river course, but understanding how can we really apply it to our daily functions. This time period is 4 minutes using 1 battery covering 100 hectares and 78 pictures. So when we speak about the results, we did the analysis, and using the DJI A2S, we captured mainly at a 120 meter altitude above ground level, capturing 443 pictures in total, mapping 292. And the resolution, based on the analysis, we can see the resolution was 3.5 centimeters per pixel, elevation resolution 10 centimeters per pixel, and map accuracy 0.8 meters. So in terms of mapping features of interest and how the land is utilized over time, we have this nice graphic highlighting what are the main land uses within but also how can we really apply it to solving real problems. So in terms of the recreational, we see where the location is, and what we realize is that along the beach itself, there's a lot of erosion happening, and we are able to actually pinpoint where beach profile features and how can we assess it over time using at least a monthly monitoring mechanism to be able to do this. We see where there's a lot of different coastal uses happening within this small little area. So we have the cultural area, we have also a recreational area and different type of vegetation zones, but also unauthorized development. And we realize this drone application can be used, and we are seeing next slide the different features that we can apply through this simple mapping exercise. In terms of applications, we can firstly monitor shorebirds weekly, and you see where some of our footage would have captured the shorebirds, and we intend to continue to monitor that weekly. In terms of monitoring illegal development and dumping monthly, what we realize is that there are few pockets of development within the area, and we can use drone footage to monitor this. In terms of monitoring dieback, this can happen monthly as well to be able to understand the changes in vegetation, but also monitoring shoreline changes can happen monthly. And we saw the levels of erosion that would have happened along the beachfront, and the use of this technology will advance some of our monitoring mechanisms, especially at the Ministry of Fisheries. So in terms of our applications, we realized that there were enumeration of fishing vessels and gears. We are able to differentiate active, inactive, and illicit vessels. So in terms of active vessels, you can see clearly on the image on the left, we were able to pinpoint exactly what those 27 vessels look spatially, and also highlighted the count for the inactive vessels. In terms of livelihoods and catch per unit effort estimation, we are able to map this efficiently. Also infrastructure inspections and planning, but also we are able to monitor and enforce some of the regulations with respect to unregistered or intransit events. And this is the end of the presentation. Thank you for listening. I hope any questions you could let me know.
Thanks so much.
My name is Ryan Manet. From the organization Species. We are a nonprofit organization. And the site we chose to monitor was the Blanchisseuse Village. Just to mention here that I had assistance doing this flight from Leo, who was the flight engineer and the observer, and the data collector extraordinaire, Aaron. Let's get right into it now. The Blanchisseuse Village is on the north coast of Trinidad. We chose to monitor our site from the Blanchisseuse Old Road to the Marion River, so that captures the main portion of the developed area in that region. The description of the site, it's mainly a coastal community with coastal development, which included private villas and resorts. There's also some fishing activity and recreational activities that happens in the area. And being a coastal community, it is vulnerable to things like coastal erosion, as well as extreme weather events such as hurricanes or storm surges. For UAS applications, we looked at coastline monitoring to monitor coastal erosion, as well as doing general vulnerability assessments of the area and hazard identification, as well as spatial planning, particularly in areas where recreational activity, fishing activity, and natural processes such as the sea turtle nesting may coincide and have conflicts. The habitat resources, there are beaches, which, as I mentioned, they have sea turtle nesting activity going on. There's rocky coastline and rocky nearshore habitat. Of course, there are urban areas because it's the community itself. And further inland, away from the coast, there's more forested areas. And then there's the main river, the Marion River, that exists on the beach, on the Marion Beach at the end of the coast. The mapping features of interest we're looking at would have been the coastline itself, the terrestrial habitat, which are the more forested areas, as well as the general marine habitat. We're looking for coastal development, where coastal development exists, where the beach facilities are, where the resorts are, which may cause conflicts with sea turtle nesting in particular. We're also looking to monitor fishing activity and other resource users in the area. And we're looking at recreational infrastructure and community activities. So all these things are being monitored using the UAS applications. And for the drone mapping and monitoring flight surveys, our primary ecosystem site base map consisted of 3 flights. The survey area was broken up into 3 sections: the east map, center map, and west map. All 3 maps were flown, all 3 flights were flown at altitude of 120 meters. And the flight time for each section was exactly 15 minutes. Although it was really a coincidence it worked out this way, I'm going to take credit for the perfect flight planning in this case. The east map included images, 136 images. The center map was 151 images. And the west map was 150 images. In addition to the ecosystem site base map, we did a few auxiliary flights. This was really 1 flight with 2 missions queued up, as well as some free fly, all on the same battery. So all 3 missions were on 1 battery and 1 flight. The river mouth panel was done at 60 meters at the mouth of the Marion River. The flight time for that was 4 minutes and 26 images were taken. Then the nesting beach photo plan queued straight on from the river mouth panel. That flight time was again exactly 4 minutes. 9 images were taken at an altitude of 20 meters, with the focal point and altitude far inland at an altitude of 5 meters. And once that was completed, we then went on to do 10 minutes of free flying, which was basically just scoping out the area a little bit. And we took about 2.5 minutes of of video during that reconnaissance. Right, so the mapping results, the ecosystem site base map was the stitching together of all 3 survey flights. Of course, the aircraft used was the DJI Air 2S. The combined flight time was 45 minutes and total number of images was 437 images. The combined area mapped was 92.3 hectares. The auto resolution was 3.41 centimeters and the accuracy was just about 2 meters accuracy. In addition to the base map, I mentioned the river mouth panel. The river mouth panel will be used for monitoring of changes in the river mouth because that's a very dynamic area and that can affect both sea turtle nesting on the beach as well as the recreational activity that goes on the beach and in direct proximity to the river mouth. And the nesting beach photo plan was primarily used to identify any potential threats to sea turtle nesting due to coastal development, because there is some coastal development directly along the beach, and we wanted to make sure we captured everything that was happening along that area there. Site results and analysis for web mapping dashboard tools. The mapping site was 92.3 hectares. The data products we produced were an orthomosaic map, a 3D model, as well as elevation surfaces. And I included on the top right-hand there, you'll see an image of the PGIS overlay, which was a PGIS exercise done by CANARI and Fisheries to assess vulnerability to climate change in the Blanchisseuse Village. So this actually contributed to the annotations that were done for my map, provided some data to start with. The annotation measurements, we had 3 issues identified, which was reported coastal erosions from the PGIS exercise. We also were able to identify on the map 5 new areas that should be monitored for coastal erosion. We had 3 points or areas of interest where recreational activities included is happening, including 438 meters of the river, the length of the river itself. We measured the length of the beach that needs to be monitored for sea turtle nesting, which was 727 meters, and identified 8 potential impacts along that beach to sea turtle nesting, including 6 potential lighting issues and 2 physical barriers on the beach itself. We also identified 0.88 hectares, which is the area of the river mouth where it's having dynamic change that is to be monitored for any changes using the river mouth panel. And in terms of the fishing activity, we were able to identify 46 fishing boats in the fishing village or in the fishing facility. We could then narrow that down to see which boats are active or which boats are inactive or derelict. And then we identified a few public buildings, so 6 public buildings, such as police stations, health centers, that can be included in the general vulnerability assessment for the area. And the strategy and recommendations for future monitoring, I would recommend quarterly monitoring to capture seasonal changes, as well as identify any issues that may need to be addressed, particularly in cases of coastal erosion and sea turtle nesting, because that quarterly monitoring will capture the changes over time, as well as to continue with a collaborative POS approach so that the community members and other stakeholders in the area can help to provide information and assist in the implementation of any recommendations. And additional data collection surveys, I would recommend an extension of the photo plan to cover the entire length of the nesting beach, because the initial photo plan we did only covered the areas where it was expected to have impacts due to the proximity of the development. So I think extending that photo plan just to capture any future development would be useful. Also, the use of a high accuracy ground reference point, so RTK reference point on the ground, which would increase the positional accuracy of the maps, as well as to increase the resolution of the elevations. That would be useful. And then continue with additional PGIS exercise to continue to gather additional information. And to close off, I'll just show a little video of Aaron being silly on the bridge at the end of one of our flights. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks so much, Ryan. Okay, so next we're going to go on to the Moruga coastline.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ricardo Beam. I'm a fisheries officer at Fisheries Division of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. My monitoring site was located at Moruga, specifically the Grand Stream coastline. So in terms of Moruga, the overview, the image on top shows the location of Moruga. In terms of Trinidad, it's located on the south coast of Trinidad. As you'd observe in this particular map from 2014, there are a lot of greenery, there are a lot of mangrove in that area. This particular photo shows the new Granchima fishing facility that is to be commissioned. The original facility that is still being used was constructed in around 1960. This photo here shows actually the shoreline protection and wall adjacent to the primary school that was being undermined at that point in time. Of course, sargassum seaweed visit our shores every year in recent times. Moruga is no exception. And this monument was commissioned in 2012. And as you could see, in 2022, what was the situation? It was literally falling into the sea and has since been removed. Moruga is very important in terms of fishing and agricultural activity for livelihoods. So having said that, in terms of mapping applications, we are focusing on fisheries infrastructure, shoreline protection infrastructure, the marine commercial fishing vessels, mangrove areas, recreational areas, the community infrastructure, and sargassum influxes. In terms of our flights, we had an ecosystem site-based map, which was divided into 3 maps. It was flown at 120 meters high using terrainaware. There are 2 panoramas, one focused on the fishing facility and the shoreline protection, and the other focused on the main recreational area, which is the beach at Moruga. This was flown at 20 meters. In terms of the photo plan, as you would observe, this particular flight was taken about 2.5 hours after high tide, and you could actually see where the high water mark is. It's literally under the buildings that are on that coastline, one of which is the existing fishing facility that is being used. And the second is a seawall that was constructed to protect the primary school, adjacent to which there's the church, and next to that is a gas station, which is the only gas station in Moruga. So in terms of the map results, the map to the top is a 3D map of the area, and all the blue dots are the photos that were taken. The second map is the automosaic map, and the third map is the elevation map. In terms of the equipment being used is the DJI Air 2S UAV. The total flight time was 46 minutes. We used 4 batteries. There were 420 images that were captured, and the total map area was 115 hectares. The resolution was 3.5 centimeters and accuracy plus or minus 2.5 meters. In terms of the results, besides what was discussed earlier, we had a site overlay that was done by the Caribbean National Resources Institute in 2020 and validated in 2024. There were 24 annotations, which range from the recreational beach to the facilities to important community areas, coastal erosion, and so on. The yellow line that you see out at sea is where residents indicated that was the original coastline years ago. So the length of the coastline experiencing coastal erosion was 922.81 meters. The length of shoreline protection at the fishing facility and the school was 153.85 meters. The length of the mooring area that is used for vessels is about 183 meters. And the number of fishing vessels was 14. However, according to the Fisheries Division records, there are approximately 30 active vessels in the area. One of the reports that were produced was the Moruga Coastline Issue Report. This focused on drainage, coastal erosion, and the loss of mangrove. At number 2, with drainage, which is adjacent to the new facility, it was major because it was potentially cause flooding and health issues, the mosquitoes and so on. Coastal erosion, in terms of what is critical at 4, that particular area is being eroded and is adjacent to this Moruga Cemetery. The loss of mangrove at 5, that is adjacent to the beach. The loss of mangrove at number 6, a lot of it is by human activity for different reasons, such as construction of homes and other activities. And the coastal erosion at number 8 lies between the new fishing facility and the school. And at this point in time, it is proposed that further infrastructure works has to be undertaken to protect those 2 structures. So in terms of the annotation measurements at 5, the loss of mangrove is approximately 2.8 acres. The loss of mangrove at number 6 is approximately 60 acres. And in terms of the coastal erosion between the school and the fishing facility is approximately 0.59 acres. And in terms of the participatory GIS mapping that was undertaken, it is approximately 200 feet of land that has been lost to the sea on this particular stretch of coastline. So having said that, in terms of site monitoring strategy and recommendations, we propose quarterly mapping focusing on coastal erosion and mangrove loss. Mapping at low tide and high tide is very important in this area. Expansion of surveys along the coastline using participatory mapping so we determine where we need to focus. And of course, collaboration between agencies is important. And in terms of additional data collection, we like to focus on corridor mapping. A lot of the vessels use this particular river to moor their vessels in Larafin, which is in close proximity to the site. monthly mapping along the coastline during sargassum periods, and of course, ground treating of the information that we have collected, and enumerating and undertaking vessel census activities by Fisheries Division to update our records. So before I close, I would just like to thank Aaron, Candice, and Mark for their invaluable contribution towards this exercise, and I look forward to working with them in the future. And all of you. Thank you.
Well done, Ricardo. That was a great presentation. I really loved the way you integrated the GIS data, that you brought in that GIS data set to your site into your drone deploy so that you could see that 200-foot coastline change. That was awesome.
This is Matelot Community Monitoring Site. It's basically to the northwest coast of Trinidad from St. Helena to Matelot. It's a remote scenic village accessible only via the Pariah Main Road. And key livelihoods that facing heightened isolation from infrastructural damage risk from climatic events and heavy rains. So our main focus was around the key interest areas, which would be the coastal areas, the community infrastructure, the fishing and farming areas, and infrastructure that would have suffered some sort of catastrophic event from a catastrophic event. So our drone map, our flight survey, what we did is we had done 4 flights. It would have been 3, but we had some issues in the field and we adjusted to suit. We did one from map 1, we did it in the west side in the Matelot area, and then we did another to the east side. Then we did to capture the road, the Pariah Main Road and the coastline between Matelot and St. Helena. And then map 3 would have been the St. Helena and the rest of the road from that area. A total of 69 minutes was done. It was what it took to get this map done. We captured a total of 500 images, and we did 1 panel as an auxiliary in anticipation for the drone deployer not being able to properly work with these glints in the ocean. It doesn't work well with water, so we did the panel there to get a little more information in that area. The fish landing site, Matelot Fishing Center. Total images captured there, about 26, and 1 battery used. Prior to this flight, what we did is we had our PGIS workshop where we were able to capture some information from the community, highlighted in this map on top here. And after we had done this PGIS workshop, we went out, we did a flight. We did the flights where we were able to capture the automosaic map seen below here. And then from there, we were able to use a photo of the PGIS map that we were able to capture from the community. And we created an overlay once we've geo-referenced it. And we were able to then use the PGIS overlay to highlight all the issues and all the features of interest that we were able to get. One of the important things that we were able to capture as well is the elevation map, which was also able to highlight why some of the issues why they have certain issues such as water issues and accessibility to water in this area. We were able to capture 13 key infrastructure features, 3 schools, 3 emergency centers, 1 fishing center, a health center, 2 beach houses, a police station, 1 of the agricultural access roads, and the Matelot Bridge. Other key features and measurements, the entire coastline from between Matelot to St. Helena, 3.96 kilometers. The length of the agricultural access road, about 324 meters, and we were able to capture 25 fishing vessels at the fish landing sites. About 16 entities identified, including hazardous rough seas. We were able to capture the blown off ropes, erosion along the coastlines, notable damage at the waterfront due to flooding, and to highlight from the elevation map, the limited access to water that the community would have highlighted. Site monitoring strategies and recommendations. We would like to implement yearly monitoring to track changes in development and to identify any new or emerging issues, to conduct or refine any of the adaptation strategies that the community would have come up with. Maybe conduct post-event mapping after severe weather. We know that this is something that they experience, and to maintain ongoing engagement with the community to engage and determine timing and need for any updated monitoring data. Additional surveys, we would like to conduct ground truthing surveys where it was not feasible for doing any drone work, to expand the ecosystem map maybe to Grand Riviere to further capture other ecosystem sites like nesting areas and landslides. Maybe develop a video plan for public education and outreach efforts, and create a 3D model to vulnerable areas for more precise measurements of infrastructure instability, erosion progression, and land slippage. Just want to say thanks to the Matelot community and for all the support that was given from all teams in Trinidad. Job well done. Thanks again.
Well done, Aaron. That was great. I love too the way you brought in the PGIS map PDF overlay into the drone deploy and digitized off that. That's great. Now in the future, you can do the drone map first. But that's awesome. I'm so happy. Great job. Mayaro.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ivana Douglas, and I will be presenting on Mayaro, specifically the Ottawa community. Just to give you an overview, the Ottawa village, and I focus on the Ottawa because Mayaro is such a huge region that we can't capture everything. So we focus on this particular fishing area within Mayaro, which is known as Ottawa. And it got its name from the Ottawa River, which borders the top of the community, as you could see in the photo on your bottom left. In terms of the applications, we wanted to focus on the coastline monitoring hazards and vulnerability, as you will see later on with some of the issues that the community is facing, especially with the fishing and the agriculture that is being hindered or affected rather by that. We also noticed that there are some wetland and wildlife, so we also try to capture that, and the fishing and monitoring and management with regards to the fisheries that is happening in that Ottawa community. So in terms of the habitat, the focal areas was the river, the beach, mangrove, and specifically the sand banks or dunes, which happens at low tide as you enter the river mouth. So as the fishers would enter the river mouth, they are sometimes blocked by sandbanks and dunes. So we wanted to capture that in particular. And as I mentioned, the fishing and the agriculture and recreation, those are the important activities. Just a key note, there are only 3 stakeholders in the Mayaro region, and those are the stakeholders that we would have targeted and interacted with, specifically CANARI during their PGI. In terms of the drone mapping and monitoring, the ideal would have been that big photo that you see on your left of the screen. However, we needed to break down that into 3 flights to make it much more manageable for the mission. So we captured flight 1 to the south, flight 2 to the north, and flight 3 to the west in that order. And it's just to give you an overview. So in total, it was around 415 sites. In addition to that, we also captured a panel in that area where I spoke about where the fishers would enter that river mouth, because most of the issues would have happened there in terms of where the fishers have issues coming in, as well as where the coastal erosion is taking place. And I'll go into that a little further in a moment. In terms of the base mapping, this is the overall map that was captured at 120 meters in altitude. This is the 415. If you look at the bottom left-hand side, you will see that point cloud with the number of photos, all those 415 photos that make up the map. There wasn't much elevation on this particular area. However, I did want to throw in an elevation map where you could actually see the variations with the water and the vegetation. That would be the second photo on the bottom right. In a total of 97, roughly 98 hectares was mapped, and it gave me the auto resolution was roughly about 3.6 centimeters per pixels, and the accuracy was roughly about 1.9 meters. Give or take. The overall flying time for this base map was 15 minutes flying time. In terms of the panel, you could see here to the west, which would show you the entire community to the top. And you can see the east to the bottom photo. And that way, right there, you get an idea, especially to the east, you get an idea of the sand dunes that would have happened at low tide. And that's the good thing about doing the survey that we did. We tried to capture this particular survey during that low tide period where we could actually see some of the issues that the fishers would face when they are coming into the port. In terms of the reporting and the analysis, this photo gives you a clear indication of some of the annotations that were done. As I mentioned earlier, it's not just fishing, even though fishing is like has the main challenges. We also captured a number of agricultural areas. So as you can see on the map, we had the number one, which was the fisherman. That is like a lineman spot for the fishers. Everybody would come there. We wanted to pinpoint that because that is generally the go-to. So if you don't find fishers in the communities and you're asking for them, you usually get them at that area. So everything that goes on there. In addition to that, we did record the 13 areas, which would have been the recreational grounds, which is important for community and social activities. Those seven agricultural areas that I spoke about, the coastal erosion areas, which would be the two in orange that you see closer to the coastline, and the sandbanks area, which would be in those areas that is in blue. Those are the challenging areas for fishers. I thought I put this in, but I don't think I did. But we did identify two issues, which would be those two areas towards the coastal side. Those are the areas where you have a lot of coastal erosion happening. It so happened that when we got there, we realized that there was a seawall being built. So that is how we identified the issues. And in terms of the monitoring strategy and recommendation, we do recommend that seasonal monitoring happen during wet and dry season, particularly to capture those coastline changes, that coastal erosion that is happening, and primarily monitoring at low tide because of those sandbanks that are exposed and affecting the fishers in particular when they are trying to access the beach through the river mouth. In addition to that, in terms of the data collection surveys, the river is a key area where not only fishing, but a lot of activities are done, recreational activities, and even where they will hold oysters and crabs and stuff. Those things happen along the river. So having a river corridor would be at a lower altitude than what was captured in the drone, that 120 meters. That could be done. That is one of the recommendations. And in addition to that, PUAS mapping and monitoring to adjacent areas such as north of Ottawa and south of Ottawa, all of which falls within that Mayaro region. And of course, the PGIS, such as what CANARI did to incorporate all of that into what we are doing, those were all a part of our recommendations. And that's it. Thank you so very much. I turn back over to Dr. Kim.
Thank you. Well done. Great application.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Reina Sukhdev. I'm from the Institute of Marine Affairs. I'll be presenting for Icacos, and I'll be presenting with Candice from the CANARI. This drone footage was captured by Ryan, so photo credits to Ryan. And we specifically would like to speak on the coastal vulnerability that's occurring at Coral Point in Icacos. So basically, on the left here, you'll see the map of where the coastline used to be, that's highlighted in blue, and it's now, the coastline is what it is highlighted in red. Basically, the point in Icacos was previously called Coral Point, but now it has eroded so much that it seems like a bay. And further down to this point, there is a fishing community, right? And there's fear that this fishing community might be impacted by the same level of coastal erosion. And so we consider it a vulnerable coastal community, right? Additionally, there was a coconut production facility at Coral Point, which has now been destroyed due to the high levels of erosion, right? So basically, to conduct our mapping exercise, we created a map of the west and the eastern side of the coastline. So you can see here map 1 and map 2, the details are highlighted below. So flight time for the entire area was 22 minutes average, and it covered approximately 94 hectares in total. Additionally, we would have conducted 2 corridors, one at Coral Point, which is the corridor 1, and one at the Punta de la Arena, and that is where we have noticed a lot of accretion occurring. So the idea is that maybe what's eroding at Coral Point could be accreted here at Punta de la Arena, which justifies why both corridors were conducted in both areas, right? Unfortunately, in processing the results from the flight now, you could see that on the west coastline map, that's the only auto mosaic that we were able to complete, and we were not like able to complete the entire area because some of the images were missing, unfortunately. We were, however, able to at least have the live map on drone deploy, so we used what we had. Here's the DEM of the area, which shows how flat basically the area is, because generally Icacos is quite flat. And I'll pass on to Candice to run through the analysis.
Okay, thanks, Rena. And just to go back to highlight the applications, they were looking at coastal community vulnerability. This is a very highly vulnerable community in terms of sea level rise, coastal erosion. And we chose this part of the map to showcase in terms of the analysis and reporting, because this is actually where CANARI focused for the participatory GIS exercise for Icacos. And so we were able to, in drone deploy, put in several annotations which were in alignment to what we found in that participatory GIS exercise. We were not able to overlay it. I'm not sure if this was an issue because of the images that we were not able to capture for this part of the map, but we were able to reference the PGIS and put in some of the features. So you could see here, we've highlighted some of the critical community assets, which are very important for the functioning of the community, like the health center, the gas station, the landing site, because this is a fishing community. In terms of applications for vulnerability assessments, we were able to capture information on coastal infrastructure, as well as coastal fishing assets. And we were also able to pinpoint certain areas, as well as the river, for example, which is prone to flooding and pointed out by the community in the PGIS exercise. What was very useful was being able to actually tie this back, quantify some of the information that we would have gotten in the PGIS area of mangrove that would have been removed, approximately 12.34 hectares. What was the approximate area that's typically flood prone, and so on. In the reports that were generated in drone deploy, we were able to also summarize what are the key issue types, so coastal erosion, flooding, vegetation loss, sargassum impacts. And I've just highlighted one photograph here. Rena, if you can go back to the previous slides, I've just highlighted at the bottom there an image which shows where the community in the PGS exercise have highlighted a river blockage that is something that apparently constantly keeps happening and then contributes to flooding back up into the community. Just to say that this has been extremely useful in being able to validate some of the information that we had previously. And as Kim, you would have mentioned, I think very useful for us to have the drone-based maps from before we go into these community, and even use it as part of maybe live mapping sessions with them once we have things like internet connection and so on. Next slide, Rena. So just wanted to highlight here in terms of the corridor mapping that was done, and I think this is important application for the Institute of Marine Affairs in particular, and the beach profiling and monitoring that they do. In deploy, Reno is able to go in and add these annotations, and you can see in the top image, but to the right of it, the specific information can be added. And so this is something that if we do monitoring over time, we can definitely look at patterns and changes. And the image at the below left is really just highlighting some of the types of information that could be available against each of these areas. So this particular one, as Rena said, focus on accretion, but obviously the other corridor focusing on erosion, the similar types of information could be available. And I also just highlighted some of the photo products. So in addition to having the map, the annotations and so on, having these images that could be tied back to some of these specific areas are very important in terms of communicating. And I think people like to see visuals. So if you're communicating outside of our organizations, communicating and showing things where people can see impacts, using these types of photos would be very useful.
So guys, basically these are the results from the corridor that were done, right? Unfortunately, on top you'll see the corridor at Coral Point. I would say this was a lesson learned because this actually was done. Some adjustments were made on the way to Icacos. Clearly, some things weren't taken into consideration. For example, the actual area of interest on land was not captured. So the objective was that we saw the infrastructure and we were able to quantify the levels of coastal erosion occurring here. Unfortunately, the results did not allow us to do that. However, the corridor conducted at Punta de la Arena, where the accretion is occurring, it was, as you can see, better results. For the credit for this quick shot is to Aaron Peters. So besides the coastal community, besides the coconut estates and the plantations, Icacos is also very rich in wetland resources, which is also of interest to the IMA. And finally, this is our monitoring strategy and recommendations going forward. So we plan to conduct coastline map, participatory GIS, as well as wetland mapping going forward. Candice, if there's anything else you'd like to add, you can go ahead.
Just to wrap things up to say, I think especially for the participatory community planning, continuing to use the drones to support the baseline mapping or reviewing of the baseline maps and using them with the community to look at changes in their vulnerability and how we plan for actions there. So I think that's something we'll definitely be looking at CANARI. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Great. Thanks, ladies. That was great. I think team 2 points to make there. The importance, I think, you can see of doing the ecosystem site base map first. So then you can use that to fly the lower level corridor plan. So there's another lesson learned, team, on that one so that you don't miss that coastline. And then the next is the participatory GIS integration. That's great. This was really an introductory class, but yes, the advanced class that I have, that's what you do first is you go out, you do the base mapping, and then you work with the communities and the drone maps to annotate their knowledge directly on the products. So this is a great case study. So we're going to move now, I believe, over to Tobago. We're going to kick this off up in Speyside, up in, I won't say, I get all confused with my directions here. Is that it? We're ready to go here? Shanice, thank you.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. I am from the Environmental Research Institute, Charlottesville, or ERIC, and for my monitoring site, I selected Speyside. So to give you a brief overview of Speyside, Speyside is situated in Northeast Tobago, within the Northeast Tobago UNESCO Man and the Biosphere Reserve. And what this means is that this area is part of a globally recognized program aimed at promoting the balance between conservation and also sustainable development. As it relates to the activities taking place within the mapping area itself, it is still very much a fishing village, so you'll find a lot of persons participating in recreational and commercial fishing. There are a number of guest houses, hotels, and restaurants, and the area is very popular for scuba diving, snorkeling, bird tours, and other educational tours. As it relates to the UAS mapping applications I looked at, they were coastal erosion, sargassum monitoring, and sea turtle monitoring. So this is the drone mapping flight survey. So this was done using Drone Deploy, the ecosystem base map, which is the image on your left. This mapped a portion of the village in addition to the coastal ecosystem. This map, as you can see, was broken up into 3 smaller maps to ensure that it was properly managed while I was in the field. The middle image shows all of the images that were captured during the mapping mission. And I also did a flight plan for a corridor. So this here, as you can see, is the results for the ecosystem-based map. This map was done over a 2-day period due to the weather. In total, I had a flying time of 94 minutes. The drone used was the DJI Air 2S with drone deploy. In total, 437 images were captured. 3 batteries were used, 105 hectares was mapped, and I had a resolution of 3.5 centimeter per pixel. As it relates to the corridor on your right, I intend to use this to monitor sargassum influxes. This corridor had a total flight time of 6 minutes. In total, 98 images were captured using 1 battery. In total, 5 hectares was mapped, and the flying height and the corridor width was 70 meters. For the monitoring site results, I did several annotation measurements. First of all, I did points for schools. One was a high school, one was a primary school, and the other a preschool. I identified a recreational ground. I also identified an area in Speyside that is a critical nesting site for sea turtles. I also did count measurements for fishing vessels and yachts. I identified 36 fishing vessels and 2 yachts. I also did distance measurements for rivers and also coastal erosion. For the river, which I did a measurement for 2, one was around 107 meters and the other was 476 meters, and in total they had a combined length of 584.12 meters. I also identified an area along the coastline where coastal erosion has been observed, and this had a total length measurement of 465 meters. In addition to that, I would have did area measurements for several portions of reefs. In total, they came up to 2.34 hectares. I also did area measurement for wetland area, and this was 255.1 square meters. And I identified the historical site, which is the State ruins and water wheel. In total, I had 2 issues. One was a blocked drain, and this led to the ocean. It was filled with a lot of litter. And the other one was a river that had algal bloom growth. So in terms of my recommendation strategy moving forward, ideally this site should be mapped biannually. The same flight plan can be utilized. However, upon doing my analysis after the flying mission, I noticed that it could have mapped more of the coastal ecosystem. As it relates to coastal erosion monitoring, ideally this should be done before and after severe weather events to assess how heavy rainfall surges can contribute to coastal erosion. I also believe that a video plan should be created along the coastal erosion area, and this will help to provide a clear visual record of the changes over time. For sargassum monitoring and management, there should be some adjustments to the current corridor plan to include areas further up the coastlines. This will be done on a monthly basis during the peak season, and this will enable for better planning or removal and also reducing the impact on tourism and marine life. I also think that the mapping area should also include reef health monitoring to closely monitor for bleaching events, algal blooms, or other signs of stress related to changes in water quality over time. And this will be done biannually as well, or an increased frequency during periods of extreme weather or major disturbances. And lastly, for sea turtle monitoring, I think that this should be conducted during the turtle nesting season to document nesting patterns, to assess the beach conditions, and also to detect any erosion or sargassum buildup that could threaten turtle habitats. And that's it for me. I would just like to give a huge shout out to Kerry Walcott, who accompanied me during this entire mission.
Great. Thanks so much, Shanice. And I love the points that you were making, which we've all been talking about the whole time, is that the drone mapping surveys most often and always should be integrated with some other type of field surveys, whether it's participatory mapping, but you focused a lot here on the other in-field mapping measurements and surveys that could be done, like the turtle nesting, the reef health monitoring, and even the sargassum monitoring. So well done. Great job. So it looks like next we are going to the Scarborough Watershed.
Good afternoon. My name is Janice Kirk. I'm the Fisheries Services Officer at the Department of Marine Resources and Fisheries. Today, I would be focusing on the Scarborough Watershed and a slight twist in presentation. I'll be doing a preliminary review of how feasible it is for the fish facility to be in its present location. So 1990, late 1990s, the then Secretary for Agriculture would have reported on the development of a fish facility, and it was quite clear in his report that no fish processing will be done on the compound. To date, the facility is located at the site, a temporary facility by the way, Scarborough is located in a sheltered area of the headland of Bacalet, and it is located on reclaimed lands just at the mouth of the Crooks River. The facility that was temporarily built for more than 10 years, it presently has in operations of handling fish. The area is utilized by fishers, commercial and recreational fishers who moor their vessels. There is a small marina area that accommodates pleasure crafts, and it is also utilized by the Coast Guard. For the purpose of this presentation, Kerry and I use the drone technology to conduct fisheries infrastructure inspections, observe the mooring and the moored and the dry docked vessels, to observe the sanitation in the area, and to look at environmental and climate-related challenges. 7 flight plans were done over a period of 2 days. The first day we did the mapping of the Scarborough watershed and the 70-meter panel. The second day we launched from the fish facility and focused on that specific area. And we did a base map, we did a photo plan and a corridor and 2 panels. It's a point to notice that the first day, 2 batteries were used for either plans, and on the second day, all the plans were queued so that 1 battery would be used. All right, we did 2 panels on the second day because we noticed that after the first panel, the height was too high, so we had to do a lower panel at 30 meters. In terms of the results, the Scarborough ecosystem base map, it was done at 115 meters. We covered 76.6 acres and we captured 106 photos. And bottom right are 2 of the photo products that were generated. All right, so the 60-meter base map covered an area of 2.47 acres and 35 photos were captured in a matter of 4 minutes. Both plans were done using terrain awareness. In comparing the 30-meter panel to the 50-meter panel, you can see that the 50-meter panel gave you a holistic view of a better view of the compound. So you could have done, for example, a vessel count of the vessels moored on dry dock. And as opposed to the 30-meter panel, you could have gotten more precise data, metadata. For example, we could have gotten the names of the vessel, the type of the hull, and also like the color of the inside and outside of the vessel. Something. All right, so also we could have done, for example, a roof inspection of the facility at the 50-meter height, altitude, and at 30 meters, we could have more details of the facility in the lower parts of the facility itself. In terms of the analysis, we use points, lines, and measuring tools to identify and summarize the features that we'll observe during the visit. For example, we noticed that we did a count to identify 12 moored vessels, 2 of them being inactive. And we used the measuring tool to get the length of the jetty, which was 145.31 meters. Another feature of the measuring tool was the fact that it gave a profile of the item being measured. And this profile suggests that the jetty has a slight bulge in the middle, so maybe it needs to be inspected further by the relevant authorities. In terms of analysis of the fish port, it revealed that 2 areas of poor drainage were identified. 9 garbage piles were also identified in terms of area, the largest one having an area of 47.38 meters square. 27 vessels were counted on dry dock, one being two safety hazards were also identified, one of them being a drain that has outflow from upper Scarborough directly over the site. And from areas like, for example, there are two medical labs upstream. The second one being a large vessel that was leaning against the old ice plant, which is a very serious and severe hazard. It could fall at any time. All right, so the Scarborough, the larger map, we were able to identify areas, for example, so for example, the large area on the left is an area that is affected by sargassum influxes. It's 31.26 acres. And this is an example from 2022. And it also identified and verified by through discussions with the local fishers that the area at the front seaward side of the fish port is heavily affected by high intensity waves during rough seas events. From the Scarborough redevelopment feasibility study, I would mention that a little later, it was projected that the average wave height and direction of the waves heading into the port, waves can run up from the small beach at the right of the fish port and come onto the fish port area, especially in times of intense weather. And there was also a 20-year projection of storm waves that would have suggested that the entire port and fish port area would be inundated in waves exceeding 2 meters during storm events. And this is already happening. These are footage from 2019 where the Scarborough port and the Crooks River would have flooded and caused a lot of damage in the Scarborough area. In terms of further analysis, I would have gotten a PNG file overlaid on my base map from Darren Mitchell of TEMA, and it would have been a landslide and flood susceptibility projection from the year 2022 and beyond. And it will strengthen the case that the area is very highly susceptible to flooding. Further, the area that I would have identified on the previous slide of being susceptible, having beach erosion presently, from this overlay, it shows that the area is very susceptible to landslides. Finally, I would recommend a quarterly mapping and monitoring of the area, especially to focus on the wave activity and even things like sargassum influxes and changes in the coast features and the effect of the storm surges and coastal flooding, riverine flooding on the environment. And I would also recommend collaborations with public health, environment, and other departments, non-governmental and governmental organizations, because the area has been earmarked for Scarborough Urban Redevelopment Plan, and a full proposal was done. And it has actually highlighted the present area of the fish port as being earmarked for marina development. And very little mention was made of a fish facility being there. it calls for more detailed study, and it's as serious as $6 million has already been spent on the project. And I would recommend further investigation, further feasibility investigation. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Janice. Good points there. Maybe one of the points is that the fish facility shouldn't even be there at all.
Yes.
It's a temporary thing. It's high risk. Also, I think a good point you mentioned that I'd like to just point out was the timing and frequency, specifically teams, those storm events, pre and post, and making sure we have these flight plans saved to get out there. Rain events, those type of dramatic events that we saw with the cars being flooded, you need to be ready to go on those immediately. Hours, minutes after the rain stops, putting the drone up and capturing that so that you can quantify with the tools and integrate those maps and create data. So great presentation. Let's keep moving along now. We're going to just continue on Scarborough coastline to Lambeau now. And I believe that's Howard Robin.
Good afternoon again, everyone. I'm Howard Robin from the Coastal Zone Management Unit. I'll be doing the segment of Scarborough to Lambeau along the location that I'm treating with is to the west of, it's to the Signal Hills to the north, and it's to the east of the lowlands area. I had some assistance doing this from Miss Jenny Skirk, and the area basically is comprised of some residential property as well as commercial and private property that includes schools. You also have the shopper complex. And importantly, there's the Claude Noel Highway that runs to the north of the area. But there's also a redundant road that is along the coast. And that is the area that I primarily was concerned about. There's the coastal feature that is there is the coastline. You also have the lower segment of the Lambeau River, and you have a few coves along the area. The general wind direction comes from the northeast and the longshore drift in our study direction. Apart from some of the features that I've mentioned before, some of the things that I wanted to highlight in the mapping was sections of the roadway that potentially could collapse soon if you have significant erosion events. There's also a segment of the area that is always experiencing significant sargassum bleaching that affects some of the residents as well as the offices in that location. And there are also areas of instability and illegal dumping that I wanted to highlight as well. The flight plan, I did an initial base map that covered about 52 hectares. There was also two other flights that was a photo plan and a panorama. And those two focused on segments of the area that had significant erosion. This is basically what locations that covered look like. So starting from segment A, which from Lambeau coming all the way towards Scarborough, which would be section C at the end. The two other flights that were included were the panorama and the photo plan, and these are the location. And as you can see even in the pictures presented, there are areas where the road is really under imminent threat in terms of any possible additional erosion could see a collapse in the roadway. Now, these are the mapping results that I got. What we have is the automosaic, which the accuracy was 2.25 meters and the resolution 3.61. I also did the elevation resolution, and it was 14.43 centimeters per pixel. In the survey and in terms of the site measurements and so on, I did some of the areas that I highlighted in terms of the points are the areas that are experiencing significant coastal erosion, and they are referenced in the first two pictures that I showed previously. I also highlighted some of the schools and the other areas of interest in the area. I also highlighted in 9 and 10, two areas that saw some form of intervention in terms of coastal protection, but there were also an area there that is experiencing significant coastal erosion. And there's also an area that is experiencing some form of earth movement. And that area of earth movement is around here, very close to the Scarborough Secondary School and some other offices, as well as the complex that is in the location. And those things I thought were important to highlight. The final area of concern that I have is the area that is in yellow here. And that is an area where sargassum tends to accumulate. And since the direction of longshore drift, as well as the wind direction, pushes the material to the west and the air to the west, it generally affects the offices and the buildings in that location. And therefore, it's something that we need to watch going forward. As we did the flights and evaluated the outcomes, one of the things that I recognize is that we need to pay closer attention to the time that we do the surveys. Flight plan, I think, should be extended beyond the area that I did at present, although it was difficult to find areas for landing and taking off. And then it was also necessary to continue to do monitoring for the sargassum beaching. In the times when you have excessive sargassum beaching, it might not, I do not have a particular, say a weekly or monthly plan, but I would think in times when you have excessive sargassum, that we should do the flights in those areas, as well as after periods of intense rain or storms, then we should also do some monitoring in that area. We should also pay particular attention to some of the other interests that other stakeholders in the area might have. Although my focus was primarily for the Coastal Zone Management Unit, there are other agencies in the Tobago House of Assembly that will also have concerns in that particular area as well. And that's generally my short presentation.
Great, thanks so much. Another great case study. I am looking forward to hearing more about how you at Coastal Management can apply this tool. I see so many applications. Okay, if we keep going, let's go up to Castara, Team Castara. I'm not sure, there's 3 people I know working on this site. Mario, if you want to stop your screen share if you haven't already. Oh, they're already up. Let's hear it, Team Castara. Oh, there goes the drone.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Esther Tobias Clark from the Department of Marine Resources and Fisheries, and I am one of 3 members of Team Castara Tobago. The other 2 include Ms. Alison Thomas from Tobago Unified Fisherfolk Association and Mark Hamilton from Environment Tobago. And we were supported by Ms. Janice Kirk during our survey. If we move to the next slide, Castara, as we know it, is a coastal village on the leeward side of Tobago. And because of its location, it boasts of, the wetland boasts of a rich biodiversity, both on the marine and terrestrial sides of within the wetland. It also has a coral reef, which offers a nursery and supports the livelihood of fishers and other eco enthusiasts within the area. The next, we move to the activities and infrastructure within the area. And we know that is an ecotourism destination, and it has all the infrastructure and amenities to facilitate that in ecotourism. Fishing is also one of the main livelihoods within the area, as well as some agriculture, and there are some commercial infrastructure within the Castara area, wetland area. There are public utilities within the area, community centers, health centers, and the others that are listed there. And what is key to mention is that Castara is within the proposed Northeast Tobago Marine Protected Area. Okay, next, we look at some of the mapping applications that we planned for our survey, and they include a community infrastructure mapping. Mark will list those from the results that we would have identified. The coastal and inland erosion monitoring, infrastructure vulnerability assessment, because we see that many of the infrastructure are right or directly on the coast, and we'll see that the fishing facility is also bound by the river that flows out into the ocean, and urban development, which we would propose further that it's done in collaboration with other government and non-government stakeholders. Alison will continue with the next slide and Mark will chip in later on.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. A blessed good evening to everyone. We will now move into the drone mapping and monitoring of the flight survey. So you can see starting from your left, we have done the base map, an overall complete map, corridor map, and a panel. And the reason for this mapping is the vulnerability of that certain sector of the community to coastal and inland erosion. Over the time, we have lost lively stocks, we have lost agriculture and certain homes to this inland corrosion, and the coastal erosion threat to some of the businesses that are very viable and sustainable to the community. That's the reason for our mapping. The coastline mapping that we have done is to monitor the coastline based on not only the erosion, but we have an influx of sand that is now been channeling inland. So the sand is taking majority of the land space as well. So where you will have a structure that would have been 4 or 5 feet off the ground, now it's flat on the ground if it's a foundation built straight on sand. We did a panel of the facility because of the river passing through that comes down with the heavy rain, big trees come down and threatens the gabion basket. Also, we are watching the retaining wall of the facility as well. Sometimes these things will go out into the sea and affect the reef or stay there, and we have to manually remove them. Also, you will move to the next slide, page 5. We have the mapping results based on the above that I have mentioned. You could see on your right-hand side, you'll see we have the 3D model and the elevation model. And I will now hand you over to Mark to finish the presentation.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. With regards to our mapping, based on the current infrastructure count, you can observe this community is tailored towards tourism. Our issues that we have observed were 2 areas totaling to 0.97 hectares prone to erosion. And moving on, our monitoring frequency. Seasonally, during the wet and dry season, for detecting changes along the river course. Also, after events such as heavy rainstorms or adverse weather conditions. And based on the current progression of erosion, we suggest monthly monitoring of the areas. Our recommendations basically is involvement of public and private stakeholders with regards to infrastructure development and land management using collaborative PUS approach. Also training and ongoing support for building resilience in this fragile community. And the last would be ground truthing, field surveys to ensure accuracy of data collected. Thank you, and this is our presentation for Castara.
Great, thanks so much, Mark and Team Castara. Well done. I know the 3 of you worked hard and I'm very happy. Let's see. Okay, so we're going on to Darien, Roxborough, TEMA presentation. We're coming down to the last few here. Thanks for hanging in there, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. So basically what I would have done, I would have utilized the Roxborough area, and that's primarily because of where we work. We usually receive significant amount of reports for flooding in that area, and it's a very concentrated area as there are some critical resources within that short space. So for the monitoring site, we had a Roxborough, we did the overview. So the site description, there was a Roxborough Village, that would have been in Tobago, the eastern side of the island. It's within the close proximity to the waterfront, and that would be between the waterfront to the secondary school. Additionally, there's rural coastal community with urban development, vulnerability to flooding, coastal erosion, and extreme weather events. So this would have all been based on reports that we receive, as well as we would usually see for ourselves firsthand. Data and resources, there are presently 1 secondary school, a very large secondary school actually, a newly developed housing scheme, newly developed police station, newly developed hospital, fire station, gas station, and beach. So for the mapping features of interest, the primary focus would have been the construction site, which is adjacent to the river and the coastline. and the new urban development, as well as the river and the areas of flooding is what we would have been focusing on, and trying to find ways to mitigate against these incidents. So the applications will be monitoring, coastal monitoring, flood risk mapping, and hazard identification. Now, because it's a primarily new area in terms of the vulnerability and the risk assessment, there are no, or I don't have the exact areas in which the flooding would occur, etc. Now, what the plan is to utilize this map that I would have created as the base map or the reference map. So when there is adverse weather or severe weather events, we can now go and conduct a reconnaissance and look for the difference or the variation in terms of where the moisture is in the soil. So this is just our overhead shot. You can see the first big building there is the police station. Immediately followed by that is the hospital, and a little bit up the road is actually where the secondary school is. So all within a very close proximity or close area. Moving on from that, the type of drone I would have utilized is a larger drone, which is the UAV Matrix 300 RTK. Now, I was unable to utilize drone deploy directly. So what we had to do for the flight survey, I would have used Flight Hub 2, where I would have created the flight plan. And then from there, I would have processed it using drone deploy. So because of the size of the drone, I flew at 120. We flew on the 2nd of October. The time would have been around 11:30 a.m. The drone captured approximately 383 images using the wide angle lens. The altitude was 120 meters. The flight time was 14 minutes and 35 seconds for me, and you can see where the image resolution is. The terrain follow was utilized, which is slightly different to terrain aware, because if you look at the image in the middle here, you would see the 3D view. So Flight Hub actually gives you the option to see the 3D view to determine if there are any obstacles within the area, as well as it maintains a level of consistency. However, the obstacle avoidance was still on the drone. So if there were any obstacles, the drone would have done the necessary maneuvers to prevent any level or any type of collision. Right? The baseline mapping site results. So because of the size of the drone, we were able to use one flight, one pair of batteries, and the size of the area would have been 96 acres. The ground sampling distance would have been 4.27 centimeters per pixel, and the GSD resolution would have been 4.90 centimeters per pixel, and the accuracy in terms of the RMSE would have been 3.11 meters. So this image to the right is actually the area that we'll be covering. So you can see where the construction site is. There's the fire station within close proximity, and the funny part is between the housing scheme actually falls between two rivers as well as the construction site. Now the monitoring site results, analysis and report. So we see where the critical infrastructure is: the high school, hospital, police station, fire station, and the gas station. Three types of urban development: the housing scheme, the construction site, and the drain. And the natural would have been the river and the beach. So they will be susceptible to storm surges, riverine flooding, overflowing drains, etc. Now, this would have just shown you an idea or given you an idea as to the size of the housing scheme, where the construction site is once again, as well as labeling the areas of interest as well as the points of interest, and providing the length of some of these areas. Now, the rivers, this is not the accurate length for the rivers, primarily because there are thick canopies that cover the rivers. So it's sometimes difficult to see these rivers. However, going forward, I will show you all one of the features I utilize in order to identify the river because of the thermal aspect of this drone. Right. So for the monitoring strategy and recommendation to be mapped monthly, as well, that will be for the construction area, as well as before and after severe weather events. I'm going to try to utilize video plans going forward, as well as to monitor the effects of the heavy rainfall on the construction site. Additional data collection surveys with the extension of the photo plan to cover the entire study area, as well as thermal image survey. This would also be to identify the temperature variations and moisture patterns. So especially within the construction sites as well as the housing schemes, the moisture patterns will help to determine the areas that will be susceptible to flooding, as well as to identify water seepage zones near the construction sites. And then we'll do some ground truthing, which is also known as ground-based surveys, just to verify what we are seeing in the map to ensure that it is in alignment with what is going on. Now, this is the fun part of it. Because of the thermal aspect and the data elevation model, We can use the flood risk to see the pre-flood season and then identify the flood prone areas. Now, this image on the left is the elevation. Now we can see where the lower elevations are, and primarily because of how the rivers are, they will be lower than the ground level. So we could actually see somewhat of where the river passageways are, but you weren't seeing that before on the natural colored map. Now to the right is a flood susceptibility map that I'll be using to compare and contrast what we would have done before to ensure that the data is in cohesion with what we would have received, as well as the data elevation model that we have for Tobago. This data elevation model was created in 2014, but the resolution will not be as sharp as if we utilize the drone. And that will be it for me. But before I go, the primary reason we utilize in this area as well is because the fact that there's the police station, hospital, secondary school, and fire station there within a flood prone area. So all of these things are things we have to consider because these are the closest responders, especially in that area or that part of the island. So that is something we really need to take into consideration, because if these areas are compromised, who will be responding and how long will the response take to reach? Thank you.
Great, Darian. That was a great presentation application for TEMA disaster management. Really great presentation. And I hope of how it can be used for disaster management. I think that everybody probably noticed that Darian had been using a different drone. He was already an experienced flyer, but I think the point that I like to bring up, Darian, was that if you noticed, your map ortho resolution was actually 4 centimeters per pixel, whereas the Air 2S, everybody flying at the same height, got 3.5. So it doesn't mean necessarily that a more expensive advanced drone gets you better resolution. All right, there's a lot of other differences that we could talk about later, but I just wanted to point that out, that the Air 2S is still an amazing model. So well done, good use of integration with other software payloads and apps, Darian. And last but not least, we're going to do Roxbury. This is Kerry Walcott's presentation, and he at last minute cannot present. So he's having a colleague of his, I'm not even sure the person's name, but if you can get up and do a screen share. Good afternoon.
Again, I'm going to do Kerry's, he sent a voice recording, so you get his presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kerry Walcott, and I'm representing the Roxborough Police Youth Club and the Office of the MP for Tobago East. Today, I'm excited to share a project on the PUAS mapping and monitoring site, which is Roxborough Bay. This initiative is vital for understanding and preserving the unique coastal environment of Roxborough Bay. Next slide. Roxborough Bay, located in northeastern Tobago, is part of the Northeast Tobago UNESCO Man and the Biosphere Reserves. This designation underscores the ecological and cultural significance, which highlights the urgent need for sustainable management and conservation efforts. As a developing business hub, Roxborough serves as the main access road for northeastern villages, supporting various activities including residential life, fishing, ecotourism, and historical sites. However, these activities place additional strain on the coastal environment. Our project focuses on mapping and monitoring coastal erosion, infrastructure stability, and the impact of human activities on local ecosystems to ensure that Roxborough Bay remains resilient and sustainable. Next slide. We conducted 3 flight surveys to gather detailed data on coastal conditions, including 2 ecosystem-based maps and 1 corridor map. This comprehensive overview of the coastline's current state will aid in our analysis. For these missions, we employed the DJI AS drone equipped with drone deploy software for efficient data capture and processing. Our mission team consisted of myself, Kerry Walcott, and that's the pilot in charge, along with Janice and Aloni serving as visual observers. This effective setup enabled us to pinpoint erosion hotspots and areas vulnerable to sargassum accumulation, allowing us to prioritize intervention efforts. Next slide. During our flight mission, our first 2 missions were successful, but during our second flight mission, we faced some rain, which necessitated a brief pause. Once the weather was cleared, we resumed and captured essential before and after images of the river mouth. These images highlighted impacts of flooding and sediment buildup following the rain. Understanding these changes is crucial for assessing how rainfall events affect sediments, displacement, and coastal dynamics, especially in vulnerable areas like river mouths. Next slide. The baseline mapping yield critical results indicating significant areas of erosion and infrastructural risk. Some of these were several homes along the coastline are classified as first degree, very serious, and second degree, less serious threats. Wave undercutting. There were 2 zones exhibited severe wave damage, posing immediate risk to nearby buildings and coastal stability. These findings underscore urgent need for protective measures along the Roxborough's coastline. Next slide. To understand the impact of rainfall on coastal areas further, we conducted pre- and post-rain comparisons. The images illustrate how rainfall excavates erosion affecting seawalls and other structures. We documented 522.76 meters of seawall undermining, which is a high priority area for reinforcement. By documenting these changes, we can recommend timely intervention, especially as we prepare for wet and dry seasons. This visual data serves as a critical guide for both immediate and long-term planning. Next slide. Our ongoing monitoring strategy includes quarterly mapping, missions supplemented by more frequent monthly assessments, with cameras set at 30 to 50 degrees for enhanced precision. In long term, we recommend relocating buildings in high-risk areas, investing in climate resilient structures, and exploring breakwater missions to mitigate wave impact. Together, these strategies aim to bolster Roxborough Bay resilience against ongoing environmental challenges. Next slide. In conclusion, our work in Roxborough Bay highlights the critical importance of detailed mapping and proactive environmental monitoring. By understanding and addressing these challenges, we can help ensure a sustainable future for this vital coastal area. I thank you.
Thanks so much, Carrie. Recorded. Right, Janice. Just in conclusion, this has been an amazing project. I have gone out, we've trained 16 members or pilots across Trinidad and Tobago made up of government and CSO stakeholders to go out and actually do this, right? To go out and safely and effectively, legally, which people didn't mention, and fly, right? We learned, especially Janice, Scarborough, how to work with the Port Authority, get things unlocked. And we've successfully mapped these 10 sites. So the teams learned and they've put their skills into action. I think one of the concluding remarks was really the blended learning success, having a longer term training component rather than just a 1-week boot camp. We learned it all, as we know, in 1 week, but this online, I believe the online course and the feedback I've gotten from the students, having this longer blended approach with the guidebook that allowed them lesson by lesson to do each step of the process on their own enabled this independent site monitoring that we just saw. Furthermore, I provided a lot of Slack and video Zoom feedback presentation along the way that I believe was extremely important. But the secret sauce of this project, I believe, is the partnerships and the CANARI Drone Team network. All right, so there was a multitude of agencies across both islands that have been working together. And so we've built the support network. When you first start flying drones, it's scary. And so to have a team of people that are on the same page that can help and support, or maybe had certain glitches or problems to rely on, has been really important. Having our chat group and our forum to just maintain contact. So CANARI has also trained under me another team of 3 different islands as part of the Sustainable Sargassum Management Project in the OTs. So I would recommend that we maintain these drone networks, build upon them moving forward. So recommendations, next steps. I obviously continued flight practice, getting out their teams, continuing missions for your various agencies, for your applications will be essential, as well as the knowledge sharing, but also maintaining drone education, industry updates, app updates. There's new things. This isn't an industry that you can just sit back and relax. Continuing the training, more advanced training in participatory GIS, UAS applications. All right, we had to learn the basics here, but really taking it to the next step where we integrate that. We work with communities to map and use analysis tools to create GIS data and analyze it would be very important, especially advanced GIS training. Understanding that the drone deploy software and drones were provided to the partners under this project by CANARI, but the license is for 1 year. So thinking now CANARI and partners about how to maintain and renew that license is extremely important to the success. And really, to me, this was just the beginning. We're going to do the course certificates, and these are more than just certificates. Each one of these people here can sit there and smile because you have worked hard. I know, and you know where you started and where you are today. And the fact that you've successfully done your own sites from start to finish on your own is a huge accomplishment. You all should be very proud of yourself for putting yourself out there, learning a new skill. And I can't wait to see how each of you continue to apply this, not just for the Tech for Coastal Resilience project, but all of your projects and your environmental management work and stakeholders moving forward. With that, we will close this out. And I've got course certificates for every person. All of the pilots have passed this class with flying colors, which means they completed all 80 hours of online and in-person coursework. It was 40 hours in person, 40 hours online just of classes, not even including all of their time out flying. So I would say at least about 120 hours each one of these people have put in.
Again, to close, very happy that the participants all found this very useful and practical, and we can definitely see they'll be continuing with the applications. And from CANARI, we definitely look forward to continue working with you all and supporting however we can. We definitely keep in mind how we move forward with the licenses and what we can do on the projects that we have. And we will keep everybody in the loop. So this was a great experience. And thank you so much, Kim, for everything that you put into this for us.
Yeah, great. No problem. Thank you all to my pilots. I'm trying to get there. I just wanted to say I really have had a great time working with all of you. I'm really proud of all of you, and I hope that we can continue this drone journey moving forward. Like I said, not to put another plug, but follow me so that you can stay up to date on new updates, new drones, and hopefully I will be seeing you all sometime in a very near future. Keep in touch, and I'm very proud of you.